Whychus Creek is kind of a big experiment in flow restoration. As I mentioned, we started restoring flow here not long after the passage of the In-Stream Water Rights Act and the Conserve Water Act, which really allowed irrigators to conserve water and to place and protect that water in stream. So it really gave it a priority date in the prior appropriation doctrine, which is what the Oregon Water Code is based on, and it allows for the protection of that water past other diverters. And so Whychus Creek was really one of the first places in Oregon to use the conserved water statute, and Three Sisters Irrigation District was really innovative and forward thinking in using that statute, and there really was no recipe at the time for how to do that or how to fund it. Pipe that's placed in the ground is high density polyethylene pipe. It's quite expensive, and we really didn't know how to raise the money to fund that kind of project. So the Deschutes River Conservancy worked hand in hand with Three Sisters Irrigation District to really leverage multiple funders to help pay for this project.
So when the nonprofit organizations, the Deschutes River Conservancy, Deschutes Land Trust, and Upper Deschutes Watershed Council decided to focus their restoration programs on Whychus Creek, one of the unexpected and pleasant surprises is that the Three Sisters Irrigation District and the leadership of the Three Sisters Irrigation District, their board and their manager, Mark Thallaker, were extremely excited about the opportunity to partner with nonprofits to help conserve water and restore in-stream flows in the creek. This isn't always the case. Sometimes irrigation districts are reluctant to partner with conservation organizations because they perceive the potential to lose water and be less well off in terms of water supply. But Three Sisters Irrigation took a very, very long view and decided that working with conservation groups to address a problem that was well recognized in the community was an opportunity for them to be proactive and to be a part of the solution. And so the leadership of Three Sisters Irrigation District and their conservation work and their water leasing work should get a lot of credit for all the conservation success that's occurred in Whychus Creek in the last 20 years.
A primary focus of our efforts in the region are around restoring flow to the many streams in the area that provide habitat for fish and wildlife and recreation for people. There's significant irrigation diversions across the entire Central Oregon region that pull water out of streams like Whychus Creek and out of rivers like the Deschutes. While this water is critically important for irrigators and farms and local economies, there's been about 3 decades of innovative work to try and restore stream flows throughout this area. Working with a number of partners with creative solutions, irrigation districts, nonprofit organizations, etc., new concepts were developed for how to restore flow to some of these rivers and streams. While many still have incredible habitat value, the lack of stream flow impairs water quality, limits the available habitat. And so through partnerships with groups like Southern Oregon University, with irrigation districts, with nonprofit organizations, unbelievable progress has been made with many dozens of projects that help restore flow to these rivers and streams. So the Deschutes River Basin is one of the most iconic river basins in the state of Oregon and even across the western US and nationally. And it's really unique in many ways. First of all, the high Cascade Mountains that provide incredible water resources for the basin. Deep snowpack that melts into that river, providing flow year-round. But another element of the basin that's really fascinating is the geology and the fractured bedrock that was produced through lava flows. And with those lava flows across the basin and cracks throughout the region, much of that water infiltrates into the rock and sort of disappears from the river. And as irrigation canals were developed all across this region to take that river water and distribute it to farms and ranches, so much of that water was lost through these cracks in irrigation systems. In some places, up to 50% of the water that's diverted from a river or stream is lost before it gets to a farm. And so that was one of the priority opportunities here for irrigation districts, for farmers, to improve the way that they moved water throughout the basin. If there are ways to reduce the leakage, reduce the loss of that water, That offers the opportunity to leave more water in a river, but continue delivering water to a farm or a ranch.
The Deschutes Basin has long been regarded as very unique in terms of its hydrology. Most of the precipitation in the basin falls on the Cascade crest, and because of the unique geologic formations and the volcanic geology of the basin, most of that water seeps into the ground. It doesn't run off like you would see in a Rocky Mountain or interior Northwest watershed. Most of that water seeps into the ground, recharges the aquifer, and then is discharged as spring flow at various locations along the rivers and streams of the basin. And so the hydrograph, the pattern of flow on an annual basis in the Deschutes, is very flat, where normally you'd see a peak in the spring when the weather warms up and the snow melts and the water runs off, and then in the summer flows would be very low, and then it would build back up into the fall, and then peak again the following spring. In the Deschutes Basin, it's really a flat line. The flow of the Deschutes River prior to alteration by irrigation interests was very steady, and so it developed a unique biology and ecology around that very steady state flow that isn't seen on such a large scale in many other river basins in the United States.
So our primary ecological goal for conserving stream flow on Whychus is for fish habitat. Right here in this creek, they have a reintroduced population of steelhead and chinook. This was reintroduced by the tribes in Portland General Electric, and that's the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. And they reintroduced these populations of fish that were extirpated primarily because the Pelton Round Butte Dam complex, which is right around Madras, Oregon, if anybody's familiar with Oregon, really blocked passage of that fish. When that dam went to get relicensed, this was sort of a condition of relicensing. And so every year, smolts are released with steelhead and chinook into Whychus Creek, and as part of the reintroduction effort, and then they're tracked as they come back whenever that time is. And so this water is to really help develop complex habitat. Lower downstream on this creek, the Land Trust owns a lot of property on Whychus Creek, and they have really partnered closely with the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council to re-meander the creek and really reclaim the floodplain there. And that allows for the development of complex habitat for steelhead, for chinook, for native red band trout. There is a healthy population of native red band trout here. Also upstream, the Forest Service has also done very similar work with reclaiming the floodplain. And these are really big projects, and they are really reaping big rewards for the fish.
All fish species in the Deschutes Basin are of importance to the tribe, but two species that are very important for us are the Chinook salmon and the summer steelhead. Those are anadromous fish that journey to the ocean and then return for spawning. This stream has been an active stream for the anadromous fish, the salmon and steelhead, for us for forever, and maintaining that is of great importance to the tribe.
So with the construction of several very large dams on the Deschutes River, Pelton and Round Butte dams, access for salmon and steelhead, the so-called anadromous fish that historically made it up into the upper basin, were incredibly important for tribes, for other non-tribal communities that lived here, ceased. And so we lost the connection between the upper Deschutes River and these fish that go to the ocean to grow and then return to the watershed. With the relicensing of those dams, there was an opportunity to build new passage structures that would allow for fish both to move downstream past the dams, but also come back upstream. And that created an opportunity and an impetus to really work incredibly hard with ranchers, with irrigation districts, and with NGOs to try and improve habitat, to try and improve passage, and try and create rivers and streams that could support these salmon and steelhead as they were reintroduced and as they returned to these rivers and streams.
In the natural resources world, we talk a lot about the need for restoration, and there are different kinds of restoration. There's habitat restoration, there's stream channel restoration, there's riparian restoration, and the work that Bonneville Environmental Foundation's water program focuses on is water restoration. And the reason we need water restoration is that much of the western United States, and certainly the Deschutes Basin of Oregon, is a very arid geography. The city of Bend gets about 11 inches of precipitation a year. And while the Cascades receive a lot of snow and moisture, parts of the basin are extremely dry. And so water is a precious resource in a basin like this.
So the concept of water restoration, or being able to restore and enhance flows in some of these critical streams and rivers, emerged in the late 1980s as Oregon created a first of its kind legislation that allowed for water to be put back into rivers and streams and protected for fish and wildlife, water quality, or social benefits. And so a whole suite of tools and practices were developed, working with irrigators, working with farmers collaboratively to try and restore water, to help bring water back to these impaired watersheds, rivers, ecosystems.
So water restoration can take many different forms, but at the core, it's a partnership. It's a collaborative effort with the water right holders to find ways to make their water use more efficient, sometimes find water use that's no longer needed and reallocate that water in stream. And that's a term people use a lot, reallocate, because the state allocated the water to out of stream uses, and we're in the process of reallocating some of that water back to rivers. So water conservation is a major component of the work here in the Deschutes Basin. The irrigation canal network that brings water from the river to the farms loses as much as half of the water that's taken out of the river through seepage into the ground. And so there are a lot of opportunities to increase the efficiency of that distribution system. And instead of the water seeping into the ground, it can stay in the river. Other ways to restore water is to lease water from farmers who don't need the water in a particular year, or lease some of the water if they don't need all of it. And then there are other opportunities to acquire water. There's some low economic uses for water, and that presents opportunities to acquire it and transfer it back into the river. So one of the main components of water conservation in the Deschutes Basin has been the piping of the large irrigation canals here. Those canals are the major source of water loss in the water distribution system. And so piping a canal, instead of taking 100 CFS out of the river, cubic feet per second out of the river, maybe you only have to take 50 CFS out of the river. And that saved water can be used to enhance habitat in the river. It can be used to shore up water supplies for farmers. It can be used to help provide water to growing cities. So conserving water does a lot of good for a lot of different people.
The importance of the water, shush we call it in our native language, is of great importance to my people, the tribe. We have been here since time immemorial and have managed this resource to the best of our ability for several reasons. One, it is a major food source supplier for our people. The fish has always been a very important food source for our people. The water, we were taught that the water is life and must be respected, managed, and utilized wisely for ourselves and for future generations.
As the Deschutes Basin was colonized by white settlers in the late 19th century, water was really the driving force for the development of the economy of the region. And the water resources of the Deschutes Basin were quickly appropriated by those settlers for farming. And by 1910, 1920, virtually all of the water in the Deschutes Basin had been allocated by the state of Oregon for out-of-stream uses. And so we wind up with a situation where certain reaches of the river, because of these extractions, taking water out of the river through irrigation diversions so that people can farm, have left portions of the river completely dry in some cases, and that creates obvious issues for the aquatic life of those reaches.
If we go back and look at the history of water allocation in the Deschutes Basin, I think there's not too many people that would disagree that the water allocation was over allocated. and there was more water being withdrawn and less attention really to what those impacts were to the ecosystem. And Warm Springs, I think, has worked with a lot of those users to better understand why it's important for us to balance the use of this water. What can we do collectively, working together and making improvements on a consensus basis to see these streams go back to as close as possible to what they are capable of for the reintroduction effort of fish above this project here that I'm standing behind. This project was licensed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. One of the conditions the tribes mandated, the United States government mandated, and all of the governmental agencies involved in putting requirements on a licensee was to undertake an effort to reintroduce fish above this project. And with that brought a lot of challenges. It brought a lot of people to the table that were, I think, a little bit unaware of what and how that would unfold. But the tribes, along with our partner, Portland General Electric, worked together with those agencies and those water users to make slow improvements in the right direction so we can get an ecosystem in the condition to receive the returning fish, and most importantly to have a homeland base for the small fish as they spawn out of the river, as they emerge out of the gravel. There's got to be an ecosystem there for them to basically grow up. And so working with a lot of those agencies, a lot of those end users that were basically looking at how do I protect my interest, the tribes, I think, were able to help articulate a pathway to bringing changes to the basin to allow that to happen. We've seen a lot of changes over the course of the last 20 years, and we look for a lot more changes to come in the future. Our discussions are moving now towards larger projects that are going to take a lot of effort to undertake, but we believe that they are the right thing to do for the use of this water, not just for fish, not just for the tribes, but for the water users as well.
Prior to 1987, Oregon did not have a means legally to put water in stream. If we had been standing here back in the 80s or even early 90s, this creek would be dry during irrigation season. It would just be cobble, and I think a lot of folks that grew up here in Sisters remember the creek that way. The creek is on or the creek is off. And so the Deschutes River Conservancy, whose mission is to restore stream flow, worked with the Three Sisters Irrigation District to improve that situation for fish and also for irrigators. It's really a win-win situation.
Our involvement in the Whychus Creek restoration effort was driven by a desire to see a harvestable return of anadromous fish, specifically the spring Chinook, into the upper basin where their homelands once were. And our effort to do that was through the ownership interest in the Pelton Round Butte project, and the tribes have spent millions of dollars with other partners in acquiring lands and also piping canals, piping irrigation ditches, putting in riparian zones, dropping the temperature level so we can have a productive ecosystem for the reintroduction of fish in the Whychus system. There are still several challenges in front of us, but we have moved from a place, I'll say 20 years ago, to where water was really utilized without the full understanding of impacts to all resources in the ecological system. Over the course of the last 20 years, the tribes have worked with a lot of different water users in the basin to help them understand the importance of how a balanced approach to utilizing this water resource is for the farmer, for the tribes and the fish, and for the municipal uses in the basin. So bringing all of those folks together and discussing what the importance is of wise water management is a very high priority for the tribes.
Okay, so we're standing here in front of the tail race, which is directly behind us for Mackenzie Hydro. We always build our tail races first because we have to do it when the ground's dry and the reservoir is empty. So basically, behind us is this large concrete structure, which the water then flows out of the turbines and flows into the tail race and then into the reservoir. And you can see out here, it's a fairly elaborate concrete structure box with a big apron that then runs over riprap down into the reservoir. Up above here, we've got our pipes coming in. And so because the turbines tend to neck down, our 42-inch 5.5-mile penstock has gone from 42 to 36 to 24, and then 24 right here will attach to the turbine. Basically, we started the main canal piping project back in 2009. We did the first 3 phases, and then the Watson Hydro in 9, 10, 11, and 12, and then got the hydro going about 2014. We then embarked in 2012 upon phase 4, which was the first of 6 phases for this 5.5-mile project. And here we are today completing the last phase, where we're coming into the hydro project with the 42-inch penstock that runs from Watson Reservoir down here to the hydro project into Mackenzie Reservoir, and then the pressurized pipe, which starts at 54-inch up by Watson Reservoir and drops down to 48, to 42, 36, 24, and eventually 18, where it terminates here in the reservoir. So this is the final phase of our main canal piping project, which has been a total of 30 miles that the district has been working on since 2004. One of the fabulous things about irrigation modernization is all the compounded benefits that result from after the projects are finished. And so, here we are after spending basically 24 years of building pipelines and hydro plants and restoring stream flows and bringing more water to the farmers. But what does that really translate out to? And it's pretty incredible stuff. When all 3 hydro plants are completed, we'll be producing between 4 and 5 million kilowatt hours of clean, green, renewable energy that we sell to Pacificor, who then basically reduces their carbon, reduces their coal habit, and uses our power to substitute for that. In addition to that, we were able to bring 9 million kilowatt hours of conservation on farm by eliminating almost all 200 pumping plants on farm throughout the district, which saves the farmers over $600,000 a year in electric bills, which they then in turn spend in the local economy. And we find that our farmers on average these days spend about $2 million additional dollars annually on tractors, on pivots, on new farm buildings, on seed crops, and now even hemp. So it's been quite an economic boom locally for a number of folks. In addition to that, we've put 30 CFS of protected flow in Whychus Creek, which will help bring back steelhead and salmon. Just a note, the last time salmon and steelhead swam through Sisters was 1885. So we now, I think it was last year, we just had 9 radio tagged Chinook spawn in lower Whychus down in the canyon. We're not too far away from the anadromous reintroduction starting to become a reality through the restoration projects at Camp Polk and some of the other places along the river. In addition to that, there's a lot of health and safety with the pressurized water. We don't have to worry about somebody falling in an open canal and drowning anymore. And one of the things that is truly a wonderful benefit, especially living in wildfire country, is that we can fill a 4,000-gallon water truck at 100 psi in about 4 or 5 minutes. So ultimately, all of our farmers from March through November will have pressurized water, and so they have on-farm fire protection against wildfire, but we're also then able to fill up fire trucks if they got to fight a blaze either out on the grasslands or up in the Deschutes National Forest. So hydropower comes in different flavors, and normally when people hear about dams and hydropower, they worry about it being bad for fish and bad for the environment. But the hydro that we deal with is in conduit hydro, and so it is completely environmentally friendly. In order to qualify for renewable in conduit hydro, we have to make sure that we have done taking care of all fish passage and fish screening. TSID has a state-of-the-art Farmers Conservation Alliance fish screen up there, and so all the fish are returned to the stream unharmed, and they have passage so they can swim on up into the upper reaches of the creek. And in addition to that, we've done extensive riparian restoration in conjunction with all of our hydro projects. And so because our power is environmentally friendly, PacifiCorp and PGE are able to use that for their renewable portfolio standard and use the power to basically get them to the carbon-free goal that we're all working towards to get to. So when you hear the word hydro, they're not all the same. And in conduit is definitely environmentally friendly, it is definitely renewable, and it is a supplemental use. So it's a wonderful thing.
BEF's relationship with SOU is incredibly unique and incredibly important. We've been partnering with SOU for more than a decade with students, with academic advisors, to identify new and different ways that an academic institution and a student body can contribute to really cutting-edge solutions around energy, water, and carbon. And many of you may be aware of the renewable energy partnerships that BEF has had with SOU, some of the incredibly innovative work associated with solar and dorms, but there's a long list of what we've accomplished together. And as we think about how our world is changing with climate, with water availability, with water quality, we're increasingly aware that these water issues are a primary driver for what we care about in the world, for what the student body cares about, for what the academic side of SOU is working on. And BEF is incredibly proud of this relationship, and we value the work together of listening to students and understanding what their concerns and needs are, of listening to academics and scientists and professors and understanding how to incorporate these new trends and solutions into content that will prepare students and people at SOU to take this work that we're doing today and expand on it tenfold, find new and better solutions to put water back in rivers, to provide water for humans, farms, and ranches, to create renewable energy, and to solve carbon and climate issues. So this relationship with SOU mimics some of the most powerful university NGO relationships that exist in the country, of thinking out of the box on where and how can we identify new ways to really test and pilot and refine some of these new tools and solutions that are going to be required. So we're incredibly grateful for the students and their optimism and their perseverance in this work, and the professors that help integrate this content into courses. And we believe this is just one small step within this grand partnership, and we hope there's many more to come. So thank you for all of your time and your commitment to learning about this work and participating in it.
So as we stand here today and we look at where we were 20 years ago and where we're going 20 years from now, the tribes are very hopeful that we are moving in the right direction, and that we have a lot of the players involved in water management understanding the importance of what water means to the tribe. Water is life, we say, and the fish that live in the stream are what we call a first food. It was one of our first foods that the Creator gave us. So it's very important for us to recognize that managing this resource for that first food, managing this resource for wise use, is very important. We are taught at a young age that we manage this resource for 7 generations to come. It's not ours to own, it's ours to utilize for those future generations. And what we leave for those future generations is important for us when we sit down at the table and start looking at water management issues in this basin.